All right, we're live. How's it going?
Good. How about
Awesome.
you?
I'm doing good. Yeah, it's a bit later than I normally do talks. I usually do like morning ones, but it's 2 p.m. for me. What time is it for you?
Same.
Oh, okay. I forget where everybody's from. Are you California?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. Got it, got it. Yeah, later tonight I'm doing a debate of sorts at 6 p.m., which I normally definitely don't do stuff that late because I'm an old man. But that's with somebody from the East Coast, so it'll be 9 for them. But yeah, all the time zones. Okay, so yeah, go ahead. Where are we at now? We're doing part two of going through a bunch of slides you have. What are we up to?
So this is just the basically the argument against veganism that people just need to mind their own business. It tastes good. It's a personal choice. Stop forcing your beliefs on others. Morality is subjective. So
Mm-hmm.
how would you respond if someone gave you that objection?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So let's see. It tastes good. Yeah, I would say that. I'm trying to think if there's anything where I would say that something feeling a certain way should make it acceptable. I definitely wouldn't call it moral. So even if I was going to do an action because it made me feel better, like if I had to choose to like sacrifice 1,000 random strangers to save my own child, um, it might be something I is ingrained in like my species where we want to protect our kids, but I wouldn't call it moral even if I decide like it's justified in my own mind. So yeah, I would just call that argument bad in general. Say like like if somebody thinks it's not immoral to eat animals, they don't even need to justify it with it tastes good. They would just say they don't think it's wrong. So I guess it's an unintelligent argument to say it tastes good.
And also the taste argument. Maybe you could hypothetically have someone who if they don't have that taste of animal products and they get almost an they get a almost infinite amount of suffering, but I don't really think that pans out in the real world.
Yeah.
Even if you like, I don't think it doesn't really help veganism to argue that vegan food necessarily tastes exactly the same or
Hmm.
better than animal products, even though someone could definitely think that. But
Hmm.
I
Yeah,
think,
I don't think there's any amount of taste issue with a food that would justify an immoral act. I
and
guess
I
if the
don't.
healthiest foods for us that were non-animal based foods, if they all tasted specifically gross,
What if
hmm.
someone pukes unless they eat beef?
Yeah, like
Because
they would.
it's so disgusting.
Yeah, I mean. Yeah, no, that's pretty interesting. I think it would take an extreme example like that. I guess it would come down to what's good for them or not. So if somebody was unable to keep food down because their body refused to let them keep it down unless it was beef, I would say somebody deserves, in my opinion, to be able to survive and be healthy. And so, if beef was the only thing they could consume that would make them not starve to death, I'd be in favor of letting that happen. I think.
Yeah, but I think we would both agree that on a practical level, for most people, at least this is more this. Any food is going to be uh, it's going to be biased towards the region. But for U.S., like I think most people would say that a peanut butter and jelly sandwich tastes very good,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I,
and
I, I
so
don't think it's a reasonable when talking about morals to say, like an argument saying that vegan burgers and vegan sausages for somebody to say, oh, it doesn't taste quite like meat yet, so I'm not going to switch over. That's just a way for somebody to describe why they're going to still do an immoral act. It doesn't justify the immoral act.
Um, and then what about stop forcing your beliefs on others?
Yeah, stop forcing belief on others. Yeah, I guess that response only works for something where like a vegan says that everybody should do this or should be forced to do this or something like that. Again, it seems like somebody feeling emotionally judged by a vegan to get to that level. It doesn't affect a moral act or not.
I don't know.
Like
I wouldn't even go that far because
mm,
we have, as a society, we have laws to force beliefs. Like murder is bad.
mm-hmm.
Murder of humans is bad.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so to live in a moral society, beliefs have to be forced to a certain extent. Not everything can be, unless you want to live in anarchy, which
Mm-hmm.
that could be another debate. But
Yeah. Yeah, so the idea of any argument to change any current system or law would essentially be sort of forcing one's beliefs on somebody. Although, so I guess it's a bad argument in the sense that they're saying force because most people are just discussing things. Um, so really, it only makes sense to say force if the person is telling the non-vegan, if I were a dictator of this land, I would force you to do it. So I think it's just a straw man, if anything. Um,
so, um, one thing I would say, I think usually people who are saying this, I would agree, they're not saying it to like someone who says, "Oh, I think it should be illegal to eat meat." They're
mm-hmm.
they're saying it because they're uncomfortable with those ideas,
Yeah,
or they think that it's just a diet
yeah,
and health thing.
yeah.
They think, oh, you're just telling everyone about your diet all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really, I think these are just examples of people not thinking through at all what they're saying. They just want a quick response to not talk about the topic. So morality is
So, do
subjective
you
is
think
such
there's
a
any way to effectively respond to that type of person who would say that, or do you think you just have to end the conversation?
to all of these. Well, to the first three, I would just respond saying that it has not that has that these answers have nothing to do with morals. If we're saying it's immoral to eat animals when you don't need to, then it tastes good doesn't affect that. It's a personal choice doesn't affect that. The personal choice be the immoral thing, and then not don't force your beliefs on me. That it doesn't affect if somebody's sharing that an idea is immoral. Um, so I would just say like I don't understand why you're saying that to me because all those things aren't responses that make any sense. It's kind of if somebody just says like something about veganism and then somebody puts in the comments bacon and that's it. I don't think of these as intelligent responses. The morality is subjective. I think that one has a slightly different response, and I think it's just as simple as saying, yeah, that might be true, but in a society, we want to have laws that represent how we view morals. So, so if in a society where it was okay to sexually assault people, if somebody wanted to make that illegal, then somebody could say, "Oh, morality is subjective. You should let me sexually assault people." And so you just point out that yes, it can be subjective, but I'm trying to convince you why you should have the same subjective feeling as me on this if you think animals can suffer and want to live.
And it also it kind of relates to the paradox of tolerance, where you can't that if you're tolerating everything, you're actually tolerating intolerance. The people who think that veganism is forcing beliefs, they are compared to vegans forcing their beliefs onto animals more than vegans
Mm,
are.
yeah. And then that
So
works out for them because they think that there's nothing wrong with forcing anything on the
that
animals. So,
there's never going to be a society with no forcing, no no use of or control or freedom. There's never complete freedom
yeah.
for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, to gain a
Okay.
freedom for one means that somebody else has to sacrifice a freedom. To you have to lose your freedom to make somebody a slave in order to give that person the freedom to not be a slave. So yeah,
Okay, I think we can move on.
yeah,
Unless there's nothing in the chat about this.
no, no,
Okay. Okay, so this one is, if you thought the last argument was bad, this one is even worse. Vegans act superior, judgmental. Veganism is like a religion. Um, or a vegan was rude to me once, so I'm not going to go vegan.
yeah. And I'm reading this meme real quick. If you are a vegan who does CrossFit, what do you tell people first? Oh, that's funny. Um, yeah, yeah. I think again, this is just an example of things people say to because they aren't thinking it through. I don't like if somebody wants to call something a religion, the question still stands: is it good? Is the thing they're doing good? So if I say I don't want to eat animals and that other people shouldn't eat animals, and then somebody says, "Oh, that sounds like you're part of a religion," I'd go, "I don't care what you call it. It's a good act." So yeah, that's kind of these ideas are pretty silly in my mind.
Yeah, and I think veganism doesn't. There's no central power. Like if you were someone who thought if you called yourself vegan, but you're like, well, I think it's morally okay to eat honey. There's nobody who's going to be like, oh, you're banished from the Church of Veganism. I wouldn't
Yeah.
eat honey, but
Now it can kind of seem like a religion sometimes because in a lot of times vegans come across to me as people that like being part of a group that they can feel they're part of, and they don't even necessarily want others to be part of it. And if you're not exactly like them, then you don't even think of them as doing like good actions if they're working towards becoming it. Um, yeah, there's a handful, but that's just individual people. I I personally don't have much interest in deciding if people that follow a movement or a philosophy, if everybody within that group I view as good. Mostly, it's just an idea. Like, is an idea good? The idea of not harming animals, is that a good idea? And I would say that's a good idea. So it doesn't necessarily matter like who's in the group. It's kind of like when people say um, like Hitler was a vegetarian, so vegetarians are bad, or like you know like so it looking at individuals and their actions just means almost nothing.
yeah, I mean, and the religion thing, you could also say that that sort of comment, like a religion, it applies to any belief system or philosophy if you're going to cast that wide of a net.
Exactly. Yep. Yep. Um, yeah.
And um, and I also think I don't like using this term that much, but carnist. I think one good thing about the term is that it it classifies the belief that eating meat is okay as a moral system because it is a belief,
Mm-hmm.
even though people don't think that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm actually torn on that word as well. The vegan was rude to me once thing. Well, so first of all, that's a silly way to do things because like if you thought slavery was bad, but like a slavery abolitionist was mean to you once, that you're gonna all of a sudden support slavery. It's just such a bad argument. I think a handful of these should just go under a list of clearly this is a bad argument. You can explain why in 5 seconds, and it just means the person you're talking to has no interest in intelligent conversation about the topic. Because there are reasonable counters to veganism, something like that, anyways, or at least more reasonable. And yeah, these ones are perfect examples of ones that are not. The best thing that should come out of the idea of somebody feeling like a vegan was rude to them is it's a good reminder to us vegans to try not to be rude to people if we can.
Well, I mean, I think I've actually heard quite a few people who said, "Oh, I there was a lot of vegans who were they were kind of all this stuff about how factory farming was bad." So I was like, "Well, I should just get grass fed." And it was only when a vegan was rude to me that I realized, yeah, I really have to, dairy, eggs, meat. It's pretty much all exploitative. There's no ethical meat consumption.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think that I think certainly there are people who would be more well persuaded by a nice approach, but there are a lot of people who were persuaded by an aggressive approach.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, and I don't know exactly where to draw the line, but I think there's a difference between an aggressive approach and being like rude, or I don't even know if rude's the right word, or just I think there's a limit. I think describing something accurately doesn't have a limit, but there are elements of how somebody can talk to somebody that clearly their emotions are letting them talk in a way that no reasonable human would not feel insulted by. And so I think that's an element to think of. But also, we just have to keep in mind that most humans want to counter things being said. So if you watch debates or arguments or anything, you can see that even somebody that you like and respect and you think is really intelligent, you can see that as soon as they get talked to a certain way, their go-to is just to counter it, and it's just something that like we have within us. And if we went back and watched a conversation we've had, which I've done, where I'll go back and watch something and I'll go, oh man, that thing irritated me so much that I didn't say the right response. And I think that's just something to keep in mind, that your average human will work the way your average human works. And so if you get somebody to go on defensive mode, at very least in that moment, they're not going to get anything out of it. The best case scenario is if it's filmed, an audience will get something out of it. Or if that person can go back and look at it, they might, I don't know, maybe at home they'll think, oh, that thing he said was accurate, even though it was rude. But I've just never heard of that. I've never, in any person I've ever met, any argument I've had with like a friend or somebody I'm in a relationship with, if you are kind of aggressive and negative and it makes them on the defensive side, um, I don't know. I just don't buy that idea that that's a good approach to talk to somebody.
And yeah, I mean, I do think it's different when you don't want to sever interpersonal relationships
Mm-hmm.
by
Yeah.
being being very aggressive about that.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. I'm reading a comment. I'm trying to figure out. I don't know if I'm just tired or whatever, but Contrarian 420 says to me, I disagree. I think comments like these are a reaction to those vegans who equate animal life one to one with human life. So act incredibly aggressive. Let's see, or aggro. I'm not sure what aggro is, but I disagree that these are easily dismissed silliness specifically. Yeah. Interesting. Okay, let's go to the next slide.
Oh,
Unless you
I
had more
kind of
to say
want
on that
to
one.
talk about that comment.
Oh yeah, yeah. What are your thoughts on that comment?
Oh, well, I do think that it could be valid criticism, but it's not valid to say, oh, well, one just because one person acted terribly towards me, that it's like that. Oh, that's a valid reason to not be vegan.
Yeah. It could be a valid reason to not want to be part of that group, to not want to use a label, but it wouldn't be a valid reason to not take a moral act. Like I could imagine a world where I wasn't vegan, and if like 99% of vegans I ever came across just seemed like horrible people, I wouldn't want to associate with that group. I might still tell myself like it's immoral to eat animals for no reason, and then therefore I wouldn't eat animals. And somebody, if they knew my actions, might classify me as a vegan. I just wouldn't go as a vegan. I wouldn't use that label. And so that's kind of the only thing that makes sense if somebody like was a vegan that was rude to somebody once.
Okay, yeah, I think we can move on to the next slide. I don't think there's going to be any more
Mm-hmm.
agreement.
Yeah.
Your phone parts were made with slave labor. It's part of my culture. Veganism is privileged. It's a first world issue. It's expensive. I don't have time to be vegan.
Mm. Okay, so let's take them one at a
Some of
time.
they're different. They're not all the same.
Yeah. So for one, I've heard recently, it might have been Dr. Avi talking about the phone parts thing. And from my understanding, it's actually a myth, and that the phone parts aren't made, or at least, you know what? Maybe they're made with slave labor. It's a myth that phones and laptops and like LCD screens, I think maybe it is, that they are not vegan, and that part might be a myth. Maybe they are made with slave labor. I would say that anything like that, where there's an argument of what is this called? It's called the uh, argument from hypocrisy, saying, "Why do you care about doing this right thing when you do this other wrong thing?" I'd say the clear answer for why that's silly is you don't just do all the wrong things in the world because you can't make every action you do a good action. You do as many good as possible. So advocating for a good act is good.
And even if let's say hypothetical that it was easily possible to purchase a phone not made with slave labor,
Mm-hmm.
would that make veganism a wrong choice?
Exactly. Yeah. So
Even if someone did that.
yeah. So we can look at every choice possible and see which ones are right, which ones are wrong, and it doesn't matter how many wrong ones you do. Doing right ones is still good. Um, And so it's clear that anybody saying that is what I call an anti-vegan. They're not there to figure out what's right and what's wrong. They're declaring what they can to try to get you to decide that you're wrong or that you shouldn't be doing it. Because it doesn't like if they're right and they're saying, okay, well, eating animals is wrong, but also using phones is wrong. The best case scenario, they're just describing why they give up and just do as many bad things as possible, and it's just such a horrible argument.
So I think the argument it's part of my culture. I think while there is definitely the cultural importance of food cannot be dismissed, that I do think it's important as much as possible to have food based traditions. They are a benefit to society. However, sometimes it sounds like people saying this are implying that their culture has food traditions and other people's cultures don't. I think
Hmm.
pretty much everyone on the planet comes from a culture, that eats some type of animal products.
Mm-hmm.
So they're
Yeah.
sometimes it kind of seems like they're saying, "Oh, well, your culture it's more important in my culture," but I really don't. I don't think there's any vegan or the vast majority of vegans. Their whatever their cultural background is, there's some type of animal product consumption in that, whether
Mm-hmm.
that's red meat or fish or
Yeah.
dairy.
Well, even all that aside, I would say something being part of one's culture never makes it good.
Yeah, also
Um,
that.
it's just culture. Culture is cool. It's interesting. It's fascinating to find out about other people's culture. But if something is wrong, if you view it as morally wrong, any amount of culture, in my mind, should not affect that. There, you can't find a culture that, for all of history, their traditions involve human sacrifices, where you can convince me to go, okay, this is a good act. So
I
yeah.
think I could convince you for one culture.
Well, it wouldn't be that the tradition. You couldn't convince me the tradition is good unless there's a reason within it that the reason is just. But go ahead and
Well,
try to convince me.
the Inuit had human sacrifice for the elderly when they were too old to provide food. The elderly would do voluntary suicide. So what if it was
Mm.
voluntary human sacrifice?
Oh yeah, well, voluntary is fine. I'm okay with assisted suicide. I'm okay with, but also even further than that, I'd be fine with not voluntary if it was necessary. Like in our society today, I don't think it would. There's any circumstances where you should kill a 1 month old baby. But in certain cultures and certain situations, if they know how much food they have and they know how many people they can raise, and there's going to be like 3 humans that are going to starve to death, I think the humane thing to do might be a cultural sacrifice of these 1 month old babies because they don't want them to suffer. So it's not the tradition side of it. It would just be the practical side of it. And so same would go with older people too. If they can't afford to feed everyone and they're deciding what's the most moral approach, do we take out these infants or do we take out these elderly people? And it's not good. I would be upset if I was one of the elderly people, but I wouldn't necessarily consider it immoral.
Yeah.
Um,
So I want to
yeah.
respond to one of the comments by Vegan Pundit. Most of the
Hmm.
cultural celebrations are not about the food. I kind of disagree.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
I
I'm not.
do think just in terms of the memory and the feeling, foods associated with certain times can it can bring back memories. So if you've eaten a food that you ate at a certain time,
Mhm.
then it kind of those connections in your brain come back.
Yeah, I
And
think there's a lot of good in that kind of thing. I don't know if there's any that ever justify immoral acts, but yeah, I agree.
because
But I
like
don't. Oh, sorry, go.
like last Thanksgiving, I had a a turkey substitute that it was vegan, but it was very close, a lot closer to turkey than some of my past Thanksgivings,
Hmm.
where it was like, I don't know, I forget exactly, but like maybe some vegetable thing.
And you're
And
saying that emotionally, it made you feel a lot like it was
yeah, I
very
think
reminiscent
I
of
had a
your
better
childhood.
holiday when I had a a vegan turkey substitute that tasted very close to turkey.
Gotcha, gotcha.
Just as an example, I mean, if
Hmm.
you're not in the U.S., it would be different.
Yeah, gotcha. All right. So the next one is veganism is privileged, or you have to be privileged to be vegan. Yeah. So what I would say is you should always be as moral as possible. You should do, or in this case, as vegan as possible. And so even if there are, similar to if I was on an island, I would eat a chicken to survive. If people are in areas where they have to eat animals to survive, that's fine. That's what it is. Like I don't think veganism came into existence um, to tell people that if they aren't privileged enough to do this thing, they should do it. It came into existence because it was recognized that so many people were farming animals, creating factory farms, doing all these wrong things when it wasn't necessary. So I don't. This idea that I think a lot of people kind of just view things as if something's wrong, don't do it. And if it's right, do it. And so when there's something that's a middle ground where they can say, oh, this thing's right for these people because they're, Eskimos surviving only off whales or whatever, then they go, well, if it must be right for somebody, it should be right for everybody. And then therefore they can justify the fact that they enjoy the taste and whatnot. And so, yeah, I mean, you have to be vegan, you have to have the privilege to be able to survive vegan. If you can't survive vegan, then you probably shouldn't be vegan. Otherwise, you'd be dead. So it won't matter once you're dead.
And this is a hypocrisy thing. A lot of these argue the veganism is privilege argument often comes from people who say that it's a personal choice to eat meat. So how can it be they're making the choice not to do it, but it's privilege? It's definitely possible that there's places where people can't. I mean, there are some places people they're not vegan. They eat some animal products, but the amount of animal products in their diet is very low because they don't have the economic circumstances to choose
Yeah.
most of the time.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I think it yeah, it really just comes down to I mean, veganism it's just like everything else. Any actions we can do, they could cause suffering and pain to sentient beings. And so whether we're talking about animals or humans, you want to do the absolute best you can do. And yeah, there's only so much you can do in certain situations. So you look at the easiest things you can do, and so some things are complicated. Like I believe donating approximately maybe $3,000 to $5,000 can save a human life, and so there's a lot of talk on should we be donating our money instead of spending it on some things that bring us a little bit of joy when this amount can save a life. And I think for a lot of people, that kind of thing is complicated where they are unsure or they're not trusting that the money will go to this right cause or something, and so they're unsure to do this right thing. But when you look at all the options of right and wrong things, other people doing wrong things, you can't really have an impact on that aside from changing laws in your society. But when you look at your own wrong actions, you can decide, can I change that? And so I like to challenge myself all the time and decide like what were the most wrong things I've done in the past like week, and how can I be a better person? And so we can look at all these different privileges and these different ability to choose right and wrong things. But if the individual that can be thinking of morals can say, I have the privilege and the ability to not do this wrong thing, that's when you shouldn't do it. So comparing one situation to another situation shouldn't make you do an immoral act because somebody else must do an immoral act. Yeah, and I think first world issue goes into that same
Wait,
thing.
am I cutting out, or
Oh, I don't know. I finished talking and then I didn't hear you,
I
so
think you cut
maybe I
out
cut
for a
out.
lot of that? But it might.
Oh, okay. Sorry
I
about
didn't
that.
cut out. I didn't talk,
It's all
but
right.
but I
But
think
yeah,
you might have. I think maybe the chat can say if I cut out or if it was you.
Gotcha. Yeah, yeah. I haven't seen over there yet. But yeah, I think privilege, first world issues, expensive, that kind of all goes into the same. I mean, sort of. With expensive, what are your thoughts on somebody saying that they can't afford to go vegan aside from I can point out that the cheapest foods are vegan foods like bulk rice and bulk beans and stuff like that. But do you think there is any good argument to like food deserts? Do you think there's anywhere in the U.S. anyways that somebody could live where it's not reasonable for them to go vegan based on money?
Yeah, I think food deserts. I've looked at the situation, and there are some food deserts where it would be very hard to have e- even any kind of basic, like, so a lot of them. There's not, the only things available are are junk foods, and so
Hmm.
I think it would be, and so then it's like, what's your, if you don't even have have like basic source of protein, that's not.
Hmm. Yeah, you are cutting out a little bit, just so you know. Hello?
Is wait, is is Carson cutting out, or is it me? I can't tell.
I don't know if you're cutting out to other people, but you're definitely cutting out to me. Like you were talking and then you cut out. Yeah, but you guys,
Where did it end?
yeah. Pretty much didn't hear anything. You just said food deserts, and then if people didn't have a good source of protein.
Yeah, that's all I said.
Okay, they're saying you're cutting out a good bit.
Okay, I'll try to get
Okay, yeah, I don't know
I'll
if
try
there's a
to
different spot
get
you
a
can
little
sit.
bit closer to the router.
Okay, so Michael McCaffrey is saying food deserts, 99% of food deserts will still have canned veggies, canned beans, and rice. Or canned veggies, beans, and rice. Yeah, that's good to know. I haven't really looked into food desert, like what people claim to be food deserts and what foods are available. But that's what I would imagine is that there would be options of rice and stuff like that.
And no matter what the situation would be, the the only thing you can do is do what you can. So I don't think it would
Yeah.
be an argument for against the philosophy of veganism.
Right. Yeah. It would just be like if in the food desert you had two options of food, it's always do what you can. And I think the same thing even goes down to vegan foods. If like in a hypothetical where you can know that like more harm was caused by this apple versus this other apple, you go for the apple that caused less harm. Because yeah, if the goal is to cause less harm, then it really doesn't matter. Like, so for example, if somebody's in a food desert and therefore they are unable to be vegan, if they ever go on a vacation where somebody takes them to an area where they're all of a sudden surrounded by a bunch of food, they should be at very least vegan for that day or for that vacation. And yeah. Let's see. I don't have time to be vegan. I think that fits into the same category as the expense and maybe even the privilege, where if yeah, like people have to look out for their own health first of all, or their own survival. So I don't even mean health like eating healthy food, but like if you're in a society that needs money to survive, which I think everyone is, then your first goal is to make enough money to survive, to have a place to live. And so if you're working like two or three jobs and you're just nonstop working and you have no time to make healthy food, then that's a reasonable argument to not be healthy. And then if you're also in a food desert, then you're limited to what foods you have. If you're in a food desert that has rice and beans and then a bunch of other food that's not vegan, that's prepared food, and you don't have time to prepare it because the second you wake up you work and then you have to eat food quick. um, I mean, I'm interested in discussing morals with people. So if somebody's lying to me about their ability of having time to be vegan, then I guess I just have no interest talking to them. If they're telling the truth and they really like are compassionate people that don't want to harm animals, but at whatever stage in their life, due to the amount of jobs they have to have and their lack of time to be vegan, that's just an interesting part of life. And I hope that in the future they make more money or have a different job and different abilities.
Yeah, I agree with in the chat. Food deserts is 99% of the time just an excuse. Yeah, I think that's definitely
Mm-hmm.
true because there was a Earthling Ed was having a conversation, and this person at a college was saying they were using indigenous tribes whose only source of food is animal products
Mm-hmm.
as an argument, but you have to ask that person, is that your situation?
Yeah.
Even if it's a situation.
Yeah, I agree. I think the food desert thing and then the cultural tribe situation, they're both the same where it's just like somebody saying since everybody can't do it, we all should not do it. And that's just such a bad idea for any possible immoral action.
Okay, I think we can move on from this one.
Yeah.
Plants feel pain.
Is it bacteria or foreign plants for man? Yeah, yeah. Well, it's definitely funny when people bring this up. And again, there's kind of a two-part problem. So people will, read some study that says plants react to music and whatever, and they'll try to use that as an example. But the main problem with them doing it is they're just trying to figure out an excuse for why we should be able to cause pain. They're not bringing something up, like let's say hypothetically plants did feel pain. They're not bringing it up because they want to help the plants and the food. Or sorry, not the food, the plants and I just did a Biden slip up. The plants and the animals. And, uh, and so it's again, it's another one of those anti-vegans. It's not somebody that's trying to figure out, is veganism right or wrong? Where do morals lie?
I don't know. I would actually disagree with that. That
Really?
I think someone just some of those articles with the studies because because plants do they do have there's some evidence that they can sense stimuli outside stimuli. Like if you cut
Mm-hmm.
off a leaf,
Okay.
the plant senses it. Um, so I think, and also people who are more um, animist and they think like everything. I did have a teacher who, if you touched a plant, they would make you apologize to the plant in
Uh,
elementary school.
that's weird.
So I do think people can they can actually. I mean, a lot of the time it's not a genuine response,
Okay.
but someone could actually think this that they think everything feels pain. But I would say, um, so with a rock, we can agree that a rock doesn't feel pain, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully. So if you have a rock at the top of the hill and you push the rock's going to roll down the hill.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean the rock is sentient just because it reacts to a stimulus. So plants do react to outside stimuli, but that doesn't make them sentient.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, but
We're
but
not, we're not
even
sure.
if they were sentient and therefore everything we could consume was sentient, then we would just have to figure out which thing is the most sentient, which element of sentience do we care about the most, and then what do we need to be healthy? And we'd figure out what we needed the most to be healthy, and anything that was the most sentient or could at least suffer the most, or whichever thing we value, and then we would have that argument for why we shouldn't consume this other thing. And if plants were sentient and suffered less than animals, we would just have the same stance. So yeah.
Okay, so Jerome, this slide, it's not. I'm not making this argument. It's just, what if someone said this?
Yeah. Um, now I'm curious to hear your thoughts when it comes to the yeast bacteria. Somebody asked me about like bed bugs, things like that. I mean, obviously, in the case of something like bed bugs, if something was disrupting your way of life by biting you and various kinds of things, I have nothing against taking those things out. Slapping a mosquito. Um, but I don't know much about yeast and bacteria and that kind of stuff. Well, I think I'm familiar with those not being sentient, but if some do have a level of sentience, but it's not much of one, like where's your cutoff for like if there's like something that's like a bacteria that could maybe perceive things but not feel any like pleasure, pain, or suffering? Where would your stance be on that?
I'm not sure. I think it's debatable, but where it's not debatable is like anything. Definitely, I think even if people don't realize it, I think we've tacitly agreed as a society. Definitely, anything that's around the level, at least of a dog,
Mm-hmm.
there shouldn't be a debate about moral consideration. I think there is some gray area for
Insects and things
for
below
like,
that.
no, not even insects. Ants are very intelligent.
Mm.
Um,
Do you value intelligence on its own?
I I value intelligence if you're talking about killing.
Okay. I'm trying to imagine something that's intelligent, but that it can't have its well-being affected. It has no well-being. I'm imagining something that can't suffer, can't feel pain, can't feel pleasure, but it's alive and its actions are robotic. It's very like I
So
guess
you're
maybe the word
a
intelligence
computer.
wouldn't be. Yeah, well, just like I'm imagining something like an ant. Let's imagine an ant but where it couldn't suffer, but it knew exactly how to do what it needed to do. It could find its way back to an area that it's very far away from. It can lift heavy things. It knows exactly how to make its colony work and do all these right things. But it doesn't feel any suffering. It doesn't. Nothing could make its life better or worse. It's just acting as if it was a robot, but it's an ant. I don't know if I would value that thing based on its intelligence.
Yeah, I mean there's some kind of multiplicative factor. So both intelligence and capacity to feel pleasure and or pain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Although yeah, intelligence could be zero, but if there was capacity to feel pain, it should still have moral consideration.
Yeah. At
And then
very least
also
to not be harmed. Yeah. So yeah,
also I
some
think we,
consideration.
we can move on from this because
Yeah.
it's not that great of an argument. But
Yeah.
there were, I know that some vegans originally, the only bread that they consumed was Ezekiel bread because that bread doesn't have yeast.
Really? I've never heard
Yeah.
that. That's wild.
So, and that's not a thing anymore. But when it was like when veganism was even more niche than it is now.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Okay, I think we can move on to the next slide. Continuing for the sake of continuing. Those animals wouldn't even exist if we didn't farm them. Those animals would go extinct if the world goes vegan. Those animals are bred for that purpose. The animals we buy from the shop are dead anyway.
Mm-hmm. Um,
So I
yeah.
think this one has a little bit of truth in the sense that subsidies for agriculture, to a certain extent, if one individual doesn't buy something, the government subsidies will patch up any loss of profit. So a small change in demand is not going to necessitate necessarily a change in supply or production.
Hmm. Yeah, if there was a way to know that for sure, because the action itself doesn't entail that happening, we can just know it's likely to happen. Because yeah, if we're calling something right or wrong based on the demand, then the demand would have to play out how we imagine it playing out for that to matter at all. And so yeah, I agree.
And there, do you know the government cheese thing?
Sorry, which thing is it?
Government cheese, where the U.S. government, there was people weren't buying cheese, so they bought it all up.
Oh, I haven't heard of
So
that. No.
it is actually possible that agriculture could lobby the government to buy their things that they produce and store them, even if no consumers were buying it.
Interesting.
But that's still there are I could link to this in the comments after, but there are vegans who are working to lobby against those type of subsidies, that we shouldn't have, that animal farmers should not be supported just because they're not selling.
Interesting. Huh.
But I think that's more of a problem with the subsidies, and not a problem with the philosophy of veganism.
For sure. Yeah. Let's see. Those animals wouldn't have existed if they didn't. Yeah. Well, yeah. We don't need the animals to exist. So yeah, that's a silly. Yeah, I hear that. I think that argument almost is like the argument about vegans not having their babies drink breast milk, where somebody just like doesn't understand veganism and they're just wondering like they haven't thought about it. Like, of course, we don't want these farm animals to exist. We don't want them to be bred into existence. But when it comes to the extinct part, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts because I think a lot of people in general don't like a species going extinct. Do you view it as mattering if a species of animals goes extinct if it's not going to affect our ecosystem? And do you view it separately if the animal is one that we kind of bred to be what its current status is?
Well, I think with extinction, you could kind of use NTT. So what
Mm-hmm.
what trait about that animal makes its extinction more important than another animal? What makes it not, because because animal agriculture, a lot of the just the waste from it will cause other species to go extinct. And
Mm.
also, yeah, if you're valuing the extinction of the farm animal, you're kind of are it's sort of a type of speciesism, which I don't think speciesism is always it's not necessarily always wrong, but you have to be aware when there is that bias towards species we have versus the ones in the future. Even if,
Mm.
let's say after everyone, all the humans living now, the human race was to cease to exist,
Mm-hmm.
would that necessarily be a bad thing? I don't, like, I think you could argue both ways, but there's not a definitive conclusion on that. If something ceasing to exist is is, is always bad.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so do you care to keep something from going extinct just for the sake of making it continue? Like, let's say you take something like rhinos. Like, there's like I don't even know how many, probably maybe a couple hundred different types of rhinos. And so, like, if there's one specific one that's close to going extinct, there's only like a dozen or a couple dozen of them left. Do you think that's something that we should just, if they die out, they die out? Or do you think humans should like take them and make sure that they do the best they can to make them breed and get more, for the sake of a species not going extinct?
It to me, it sounds like when someone says that, a lot of times it's more of an aesthetic concern. If you're talking about farm
Mm,
animals,
mm-hmm.
it's not.
Well, yeah, especially something that can't survive in the wild.
Well,
Yeah.
they actually they can, but
Oh, interesting.
so
Um,
this is California history.
mhm,
Also, kind of the whole West Coast. A lot of the when the Spaniards came to California, it destroyed a lot of the natural ecosystem because the cows just all the and the pigs just ate everything and completely
mm-hmm.
destroyed the environment. So I don't think the if which this definitely doesn't it's not even related to veganism, but if we somehow just released all the farm animals suddenly, yeah, that would probably be very bad for wild animals.
Yeah, yeah. Um, let's see. Sorry, I was reading a comment and then I got distracted from the thing I was gonna say. Before we go to the next slide, I want to ask you a question from the comments. But before that, I want to finish up this slide. The one about the buying, from the shop, they're dead anyways. Yeah, that's such a it's silly in the sense that obviously we just have to look at the math. It comes down to demand. If we buy it, it puts it in demand. Therefore, if we don't, if all humans stop buying animal flesh, then the stores aren't going to just keep like having it on their shelves and letting it go bad, so it won't exist anymore. But at the same time, in a hypothetical situation, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this. Let's say the U.S. decides to outlaw, farming animals, breeding animals, and they starting. So right now we're in the middle of 2023. Let's say starting on January 1st, 2024. It'll be illegal to own animals. They're all going to get rewilded or put on a sanctuary. So no more in the U.S. can, people sell meat or raise animals for meat or anything like that. Would you say that at that point, whatever remaining meat at a store, like if I went down to buy beef and I knew that wasn't putting any demand because people couldn't raise, cows anymore to make beef, would that be not vegan, or would that be something like a purchasing version of what a freegan is, like dumpster diving for meat?
Well, I don't have anything against veganism, so
Yeah. No, I don't either, but
but
I don't think I would have
but
anything
I
against
mean
going to the store and
maybe
buying meat if there's no demand involved.
maybe you could make an argument if this was an actual thing. This would that there's that there will be that by buying it you're increasing the black market demand for meat slightly,
Mm.
but I don't know.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of like it's so minuscule at that point because
Yeah.
the supply the existing supply in the grocery stores is even if everyone one day bought all the meat, it would
Yeah.
it's not
Yeah.
going to have that much of a change on black market supply
Yeah.
and demand.
Yep. Yep. Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. I think we agree. Like, those animals are bred for that purpose.
I just want to make one more comment on those animals are bred for that purpose.
Yeah.
If someone brings that up, you could maybe say, well, if you have or no, the animals we buy from the shop are dead anyway. You could use the hitman argument. What if you pay someone to go kill another human? Does that make it correct? Because
Yeah. Because that's his purpose.
because that's their purpose.
Yeah. Well, not only that, you can even make it more personal. Like, what if somebody kidnapped the person you're talking to? You could say, okay, what if somebody from some other country kidnaps you and takes you to their country and then breeds you with other humans, and now you are the food. Like your purpose is being food for this group of people, and then your offspring is that as well. Um, Something's purpose that's decided by a human is kind of silly and definitely does not make something moral. Okay, the thing I wanted to ask you before we go to the next slide is Louis Ghetto and Michael McCaffrey in the comments are talking about. Oh, I just lost it. They're talking about if you can be more or less vegan. How do you feel about this? Can something be more or less vegan, or is it just vegan?
Um, yeah, I think it can
Mm-hmm.
because I mean, if you're saying that it can't, then you're basically making the argument that nothing's vegan, pretty much.
Yeah, I think I agree.
Because like, if you buy almost anything at the grocery, if we're talking about food only, which it's not, veganism isn't only about food, but if we're talking about pretty much anything in the grocery store you're buying is harming at least one, it's harming some animals at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think lifting vegan logic said that if you that getting an apple at the grocery store, it kills 0.01% of a rat.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an incredibly small amount. It's not even like one purchase of a vegetable is killing one animal. It's way less than that. But yeah, you're still doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a possible future where you wouldn't have to. And so the case where you do have to, I would say, is less vegan than the case where you don't have to. And it's just a matter of, well, it's a matter of privilege in a sense. At some point, we will probably have the privilege to eat foods where there is zero harm done. And that's just something in the future that we can't really imagine because it's going to involve different innovations.
Yeah.
So yeah,
But
okay.
that's kind of creeping into another slide past the next slide. So
Yeah. Well, and part of I don't really have time to keep up on all the comments they're saying, but I see ice cream getting brought up, and I'm guessing that what Michael's stance is, and no offense if I am wrong, would be something like kind of what we were just talking about with the apple, where if vegan ice cream causes any amount of crop deaths, even 0.01 of rat death or whatever, um, where it does you have no need for it. You are only consuming it for taste pleasure. It is not for surviving or for health, and and you could just not do that. So you don't even have to replace it with anything. You just consume your normal food you need for health and survival, and then you could either add on vegan ice cream or not add it on. Adding it on would be less vegan than not adding it on. Now, I don't want to tell people what they should or shouldn't do when it comes to little details like that. The house I live in could be smaller and I could survive. So maybe I shouldn't be in a house as big as it is. Not that I live in a big house, I'm not in a mansion. But yeah, there's something can be more or less. I think almost everything is on some kind of a scale. So,
and also with like the ice cream example, it would only really be relevant if all let's say with the hypothetical that all vegan foods caused more animal exploit all foods labeled vegan cause more animal exploitation than animal products somehow.
mhm.
So yeah, you don't have to consume the vegan ice cream.
Yeah. Yeah. Like in a I think what's best, what us vegans really should do, and this wouldn't be good for growing veganism. I think this message I'm about to say would actually be harmful for growing veganism. But truly, us people that care about the morals and we don't think we should eat animals just for taste pleasure. I really think that we should recognize at some point, if we can ever get a hold on our addictions of food, we should read as many studies as we have time for. We should understand how all different health benefits work of various different things, and we should only consume food to be as healthy as possible. And I'm not even saying that like you shouldn't be a bodybuilder. Eat extra calories of healthy food to grow healthy muscle, all the things to be healthy, but anything past that, anything like a vegan ice cream, that is for taste pleasure alone. And it must be for taste pleasure alone, and therefore we do not need to consume it. And I would say it is probably morally best to not consume it. That being said, I think I had vegan ice cream in the past month. But we're all addicted. We all our brains want us to feel these feelings we get when we consume things that make us happy. Um, the only case that I think I could be wrong about this would be if there is an element of mental health that is getting a positive reaction to eating something that makes your dopamine levels go up. But I do not think that's the case. I think people might confuse mental health with dopamine making you feel something in the moment. The joy you feel from eating vegan ice cream, I don't think is actually ever in any case improving your life. But I could be wrong about that.
I do think there's this is just my subjective experience, but any food food pleasure, there's a withdrawal where you actually
Mm-hmm.
feel worse.
I would say that's probably likely for sure with my little bit of knowledge on that for sure. But yeah, again,
Okay, I
there's
think we can
so
get to the
many.
next slide.
Yeah, go for it.
Or
I was just
and
gonna ramble on
how
about food stuff and it's nonsense.
how are you doing on time? Also,
Yeah, let's go another 15, 20 minutes.
okay.
While you go to the
So
next slide, I'm
there's
going to
been
ask
slide.
Chris something real quick. Sorry, real quick. I see Chris Hines in here. I've been meaning to get in touch with you. You were saying to give you a call. Let's set that up soon so we can just chat about that topic in the comments. But Chris, if you could put in the chat here your thoughts on if something can be more or less vegan, or do you think that there's just vegan and nothing else? So kind of getting in the conversation between Lewis and Michael here. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Okay, Smexy, back to you.
So ethical farming. What if I source my meat from a farm where the animals aren't killed and die of natural causes? So if someone said this to me, I would ask them where that farm is.
Yeah, well,
Just can
yeah,
they
but
name?
hypothetically, that's interesting. I've never heard that as a argument from a non-vegan.
I think
Um,
it's a rare one because I think most
yeah, I'd
and
actually be curious to hear you guys in the comments. I would want to see what you guys would think of this. I know a handful of vegans. Jeremy and Jerem, I believe, are two of the ones that I know that think maybe like an ethical zoo or sanctuaries are perfectly fine and maybe better than wildlife where animals suffer a lot. And so if you're in favor of good pet owning and zoos and sanctuaries, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this. Like, how would you feel about a farm where it's essentially like a sanctuary? It's exactly what Smexy is saying here, where the animals just roam around, they eat food, the animals aren't ridden, they're not used at all. But once they collapse of natural causes, if somebody wanted to consume them, is that ethical? I would say I haven't been convinced that we should have any contact with animals at all. I'm actually still in favor of animals just being in the wild. But if I was accepting of having a sanctuary and calling that better than the wild, if something died of natural causes or similar to roadkill, I have no moral stance against that.
I mean I think in the in the hypothetical scenario where it was truly a place where the animals were never exploited and they were given everything that they needed to live their life to the fullest and freedom within that situation. But I think with the economic incentives, it's not cost wise, it's not feasible to pay for food like that. Um, and it's not, it would not be, it would not be suffering free because, if they're pigs, they're still going to step on bugs the whole time that
Yeah.
they're there. But I think economically it would not be feasible for any farm to run like that. But if someone did, I don't think that there's any farms that actually operate like this, but
Hmm.
I would actually be interested to know if there are
Yeah, I would call
any.
it at very least better than any animal eating I can think of besides maybe hunting. I would say that within a hypothetical, in a vacuum, I'd call it good. Is it doable in our society? But probably not. But yeah, just working in hypotheticals, I think it's fine. If somebody brought that up as an argument to me, it would just make me want to discuss with them what other actions they do, because it must mean that they don't eat like fast food. They don't buy just typical meat from a grocery store. And if they're willing to say that to me and they're willing to have that on video, then that means even if they're lying, they're willing to share that information with others. It's like when myself and Michael were talking to JD Garland, and he admitted that he thinks that you should eat animals for health, but anything past that you shouldn't. He called it immoral to eat like chicken nuggets and hot dogs and stuff like that. And whether he was just saying it to not sound wrong, he's saying that to anybody listening. His audience is hearing him call that immoral. So I think that's really good to challenge non-vegans when they're talking about something like this hypothetical. Is if they're saying that, they're at least making the claim that it's immoral to eat meat from fast food places.
Yeah, I do think a lot of people who say this, like Cosmic Skeptic, kind of made a similar argument to this, but he was also saying, "Well, I want options when I go to eat at restaurants," and vast majority of restaurants. I mean, I do know one burger place who only only serves grass fed, grass finished beef, but that's not the majority. If you're going out to eat, then at all, then that's not the vast majority of animal products, unless you're maybe. I think Australia, the vast majority of beef is grass fed, but that's not
Mm.
true for the U.S.
Gotcha, gotcha. Real quick before we go to the next one, I want to read something Chris said and kind of respond to it. So, I asked Chris if he thought something could be more or less vegan. He said, let's see, I would say no. Would we say something is more or less racist? It would always be racist, even if the act was less harmful. This is the same for veganism. Yeah, that's interesting. I'm trying to break that down in my head, just like on the spot, and I feel like for something to be racist, there has to be intention. I think if somebody was accidentally racist, I don't classify that as racist. If somebody means something good, if somebody says I love you, but they don't realize that they don't know the language and they accidentally said I hate you, that means nothing without the intent. So to be racist, you must be intending to be racist, and it can be perceived as racist. And so with veganism, the only way to compare that to racism would be the intention or your thought process. If you're thinking in a vegan way, like a moral philosophy way, then you're thinking about the sentience of animals. So it's there's no wiggle room. It's just this animal's sentient, therefore any intentional harm is bad. I would compare that to the racism, but the actual choices and actions, I think I think one could be more or less. The only way I accept the idea of the answer no here for myself would be calling everything somewhat racist and everything somewhat not vegan. and it's like the examples that we talked about earlier that I don't think you were here for, Chris, where we were talking about how like if crop deaths that we can't get away from, someday we will be able to get away from them. And since we can't get away from them, we still consume the produce. And if you eat something like ice cream that you don't need, you don't need it for your survival or anything. You just want it for your taste pleasure. We should still do it. Still do it. Everybody here, go eat your ice cream. But the more moral and the more vegan thing to do would be to not eat the ice cream. So, if you, Smexy, if you want to respond to what I just said, you can. But since it was kind of to Chris and chat, you don't have
Yeah,
to.
I don't have a real,
Okay.
I don't
Yeah,
have an
yeah.
extra insight on that from what, except what I
Gotcha.
already said.
For sure. Yeah,
Um,
yeah. And so the next thing is about waste.
um,
Make sure to use
so,
every part of the animal so they don't go to waste.
so I would say to that individual that they're still viewing the animal as a resource,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't
Yeah.
have to be a resource in the way that they're using it. It's definitely, it does reduce the amount of rights violations to make sure that every part is used, and but so it's not as bad, but it's still not correct.
Yeah, I think again it's something where somebody's feeling judged. Somebody that's not vegan thinks they're judged because vegans are saying something's immoral, and so they're trying to justify their actions. They're trying to make themselves look better, and they might be better than some people, pointing out that they like that some people would waste cow hearts and cow livers. They're saying they would eat every part. Yeah, sure, that's better than nothing. Any bit of calories that you're going to put in your body that makes you not harm something else is good, and that's why I say the roadkill thing, where roadkill is it's a moral act. Like if somebody consumes deer, venison or whatever from roadkill, then that means they're putting less other food in their body, especially likely less other meat. Um, so yeah, it's a good act, but it doesn't
and
make it moral to eat.
and rhetorically responding to this, Jeffrey Dahmer used all the parts of the people that he murdered.
Right? Yeah.
So does that make him a better murderer
Hmm.
because he used all the
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I guess he's just slightly better than the others. Chris
all
said,
these are kind of on the same lines?
"Oh, you just cut out big time. I missed it." Okay, Chris said both would be racist. One would be more harmful. The level of harm is separate from whether something is racist or not. No, I think you're right, but I don't think it necessarily works for veganism, depending on how much you want to fit in, like the practicability to veganism. Like, would you call somebody that what they would call practicable for themselves if it is on more or less practicable than somebody else for what they're calling for themselves? Would one of those be more or less? Because if you go by the definition of calling something vegan and is it more or less vegan, if it can't be more or less because somebody's level of practicable, they can adjust it wherever they want. I agree with you completely. But if we're calling something vegan or not vegan based on can one survive or even let's say be healthy, because let's say can one survive and be healthy without harming animals, to truly fit that in the same way you're using the word racist, I think you would have to look at the detail of the food you consume so perfectly to not cause crop deaths, um, like it just to a scary level, and even then that's just what humans are able to achieve. You need a computer to do it. So yeah, I guess if we're leaving the wiggle room, because racism doesn't have wiggle room, like uh, racism isn't racism if you cannot practicably be racist. So anyways, I think you make an excellent point. I just think it's hard to compare veganism to racism, just because one's easier with absolutes than the other. Okay, sorry about that, Smexy. The next one was
But
I
I
always
think
buy local.
most they are all kind of. I think
Oh, you're cutting
the
out again.
yeah, the I rarely eat meat is the same argument, pretty much. It's a reduction argument.
Oh, gotcha, gotcha. Oh, Michael's
So I
going.
think we
Bye.
could skip that one.
Yeah, did you want to skip to the next slide, or were you saying that you wanted to talk about just the rarely eat meat one?
No, that one it's the same. It's the same argument. The local that's kind of more environmental, although the environmental impact is very marginal compared to not
Yeah.
consuming animal products.
Yeah, the local could be a good argument if they're pointing out that eating local meat could cause less harm than getting vegan food that is sent over on a plane. It's kind of like the argument that Alex O'Connor had when he was using his elk example, and
Well,
he was talking. Oh yeah,
it's
go
not a
for it.
good argument because it isn't true in terms of
You
environmental damage.
Sure. I just meant like hypothetically it could be true. Where the rarely eat meat, that argument in and of itself doesn't justify anything. It's do you rarely do a bad thing? Then you're doing the bad thing. It's like beating somebody or having a slave or whatever. Something being rare doesn't make it right. It just makes it more right than somebody that doesn't do it rarely. They do it often.
And so in regards to the local thing, I think the only vegan diets that you could reasonably design that would have a carbon footprint around that of animal products would be if you're eating only all your calories are from exotic dark chocolate, or all your calories are from chocolate and and Italian tomatoes. You'd have to choose some very even tropical fruits wouldn't matter even if they're from across the world. The shipping
Like the math
impacts
just
is
doesn't
just
add up.
not that much.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
It's so minuscule. So yeah, you'd have to choose specific foods that their production causes a ton of environmental impact per calorie. Because tomatoes, like you're not going to eat 2,000 calories of tomatoes in a day, probably.
Yeah. No, you're probably right. I was looking at that more as a hypothetical. But yeah. Okay, we can probably go to the
Grass
next
fed.
slide, and then
What about
I
wait? Grass
uh,
fed meat.
grass fed. I think that only applies in the argument that like my personal stance is that I want to be as healthy as possible for the most part, and I think humans should be able to. So in a world where we did need meat to be healthy, I'm guessing something like grass fed meat might be a healthier version of meat than whatever is happening in the feedlots. That argument only works in the same sense of the argument of somebody that is convinced they need meat to be healthy. Because I don't think we should feel obligated to sacrifice health for moral reasons, like for helping animals. Luckily, I don't think we have to sacrifice health at all. I think we can be as healthy as possible not eating animals. So I do link the grass-fed meat argument, not due to its treatment to the cow, but due to the argument of assuming it's healthiest for us.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I don't know. I don't. So it doesn't. I could be persuaded. I think the jury's still out scientifically, but I don't.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, I still think it's very plausible that a vegan diet could be healthier. But I don't think
Yeah,
I think anyone who says that it's definitely not settled
yeah.
science by any
There's
means.
so many unhealthy people that are eating animals just for taste pleasure that I don't even bother with that being something that I make a stand on in my advocacy. Like I think there's so much we could do with trying to end factory farming and trying to talk about people eating animals just for pleasure that there's not enough. I won't run out of work to do in those two areas in my lifetime. So just if I'm talking to somebody and they tell me they think they need animal products to be healthy and that they only eat grass-fed beef, I mostly am just going to say like, oh, okay, yeah. Do you want to talk about abortion or circumcision or something? And I'll talk about something else. I feel like there's so much that can be done in breaking down those other aspects. That and while doing that, more time will go by for even more evidence that a plant-based diet is perfectly healthy for us.
Okay, I think we can go into the next slide. There's
Yeah,
two
let's
more left.
Okay, let's slide to the next one, and I'm going to respond to a couple things really quick. I just want to tell Lewis, I don't think Michael's here anymore, but I would love to set up a talk with you and Michael. If you want to do that, let me know. And then Chris said, I just want to keep this conversation going with Chris real quick, where he says, responding to the vegan levels thing again, I think it's comparable to things like racism. With both, there are levels of harm that are more or less accepted. So one thing's tricky. Emotional versus physical harm. That's something that we need to think about because I mean, I don't even know if we're necessarily factoring in emotional harm when it comes to animals. I mean, I think we sort of are, but I'm just wondering. I just find them complicated because it really comes down to how much are we including intention and how much are we including the practicability. That's the main thing for me actually is the reason I don't feel fine comparing the two is because there is not a practicable element to racism. If there was, then of course we have to view them almost identical. But the only reason Michael was saying what he was saying earlier is based on the idea of if you remove the practicable part, it is impossible, in a sense, to be vegan. So veganism's on a scale of more or less. Where racism, if you don't have a practicable part, then racism itself is no scale. There is no scale. The only scale would be the more or less harm. And I think you're completely right, Chris, that harm is its own thing and then racism is its own thing. But I don't know if veganism has that. I don't know if veganism has one element's a scale where the other is not. So anyways, I just want to throw that out. Okay, so futility. I'm ready.
I think this one is fairly simple. It's just a question of if you can't if you can't improve everything about the world, should you try to improve something?
Yeah. Well, I think the best response here, which actually is somebody that I constantly clash with because he has a dislike for me, named Cliff Grant. I watched Cliff Grant do a conversation on, funnily enough, veganism and racism, and I thought he answered this question perfectly. Where somebody said, "The world's not going to go vegan, so why should I go vegan?" And then he said to her, the world's not going to all stop being racist. So does that mean you should start being racist just because other people are? And she's like, oh, okay, good point. And I think that's kind of the best response you can give is just because somebody else or many other people are doing a bad thing, it doesn't mean you should do it. And the only reason that somebody that is not racist would the reason that they wouldn't be racist just because somebody else is because they get no pleasure from it. The reason somebody would justify eating meat saying, oh, the world's not going to go vegan, so I might as well eat it, is because they get pleasure from it. So then when you boil it down and do the math, they're really just saying, I'm eating it because I get pleasure. This is just my excuse.
Yeah, I think we can move on from this slide
Yeah.
just
Let's
to get to the
go.
next
Yeah,
one
let's check out the
since
last one.
we're kind of running out of time. From
Yeah,
I have
thank you
more
for
time.
thinking about the time thing. And yeah,
How
let's do
much more
that.
time do you have? Just so.
We can do the last one, and I'll just wrap it up when I need to. Mostly, I just
Okay.
have another talk at 6, and I have a few things to do in between. So, But yeah, go ahead and go to the next one.
Okay, this one, crop deaths. So, the common argument that I've seen vegans bring up for crop deaths is that eating eating more plants reduces crop deaths because
Mm,
animals eat crops.
let's see. Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I think there are some flaws in that. Or no,
Um,
no, no. And brought up is that um, the graph that I showed there, which so the graph here is something that I've seen a lot of the crop deaths people they'll bring up if you try to say that the animal agriculture uses more, they'll say that oh these crops they're just excess
mm.
from
Yeah, which is funny because we could always grow different crops where those crops are grown.
and yeah the thing about that the like for example the stuff like the soy meal that's fed to cows, I think the byproduct of that is like soybean oil. So it's not like soybean oil is not a required thing in the human diet. I think it's soybean oil only exists because it's an efficient system to have to give protein to livestock, and you have the byproduct that's soybean oil, which can also be sold as cooking oil. I think this claim it kind of assumes that our agricultural system has to have these byproducts. And also some of the stuff the grass and leaves, like we grow hay
Mm-hmm.
and humans can't eat hay as far as I know, but that doesn't mean that we ever have to grow it. So that doesn't make it it's if it's not an actual a necessary byproduct of a vegan food system, then it's not increasing crop deaths. It has to have both of those. So
Mm-hmm.
I um and then
Well,
also
also, it wouldn't even matter if it did increase crop deaths because if it's something that we aren't consuming, then it wouldn't be added to the toll of vegan crop deaths.
yeah. Um yeah, Chris, this chart it's from Sacred Cow, so that film had a lot of factual inaccuracies and shady stuff, but I I didn't it's I think all of these numbers are some of it's arbitrary as to what's a byproduct and what's truly inedible and unusable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, and I guess I never followed the arguments that come with something like talking about the soy and all these different things because anything could be avoided if something's causing harm, you avoid it. If there was like one crop that was thought to have like the most crop deaths, then maybe it's the one that we should avoid the most. And yeah, I mean,
And
yeah.
yeah, and farming killing bugs is not a necessity in farming plants.
Yeah. Chris, Smexy is vegan. This talk was going over non-vegan arguments and how we like to react to them. But yeah. All right. Cool stuff.
But yeah, I just wanted to reemphasize that point that except for lab grown meat, which is a way to have animals without exploiting sentient beings, if you are raising and slaughtering animals, that means you must have death, some amount of death and suffering.
hmm
Whereas raising, we probably eventually could come up with a plant agriculture system with no crop deaths.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think most vegans would actually agree crop deaths aren't a good thing. it's kind of like the smartphone argument.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's tricky because yeah, you don't want to. We don't want to bring harm for no reason at all. Like there's nothing that can exist, whether it's whether it's based on negative rights or not, whether it's based on something being intentional or not. Harm is not good, and so sometimes things can be tricky where like certain insects and like worms and stuff being in the dirt are what make the soil become good, and so you wouldn't want to necessarily have like a device that makes all creatures leave an area. Um, but the less you can harm, the better. And if we can create things like I don't know much about vertical farming, um, I would assume you would need various things like nutrients that you would find in soil. I'm kind of skeptical when it comes to man-made things like just using creating fertilizers, synthetic fertilizers. But yeah, I think you're right. I think we can progress toward causing less harm and maybe at some point no harm whatsoever. I don't know exactly what that looks like because I don't know who exactly wants to be the guinea pigs for various things. But then again, I was told by a fellow vegan that there's no studies showing that the pesticides that are in produce are harmful to humans, and that might be true. I haven't really studied that myself, but from my understanding, we don't want pesticides in our bodies, and so I'm either just wrong on that understanding, or I want to, at very least, not be the guinea pig being tested on in that way. So I'd rather let other people put pesticides in their body.
Well, organic product. If you're talking about organic and non-organic,
Hmm.
organic products do use pesticides, but just different types of pesticides. So
Yeah,
those could be more harmful. I think
potentially,
we
yeah.
really don't know, and it also depends on the crop. So for something like a banana, you're going to peel the banana so that you're not ingesting any pest from a health perspective. You're not ingesting any pesticide of any type, whether it's organic or not, because it's
Theoretically,
all on the
I'm not
outside.
sure how far pesticides will seep into something. I've always assumed that though, the bigger the thicker the peel, the less pesticides going on. But I'm not sure. I know that they have like a dirty dozen list where each year they'll go through and sample various different fruits and veggies, and they'll say if you're going to buy organic, these are the ones to stay away from the non-organic. I think strawberries and other berries are usually at the top of the list. Where someone like Dr. Michael Greger from nutritionfacts.org will say it's best to go organic. But if you can't, then it's totally fine. Like eating fruits and veggies and whole foods that are not organic is better than eating processed food. But he'll say something like strawberries. It would be better to never consume a strawberry than to consume one that's not organic because of how many pesticides just soak into that strawberry. But that's just one person's opinion from reading the studies, and I'd be glad to go over it with somebody, if including you, if anybody wants to break down ideas and look at different studies that show that pesticides are fine to consume. So.
I think also with any health related thing, there's there, and this was on it was on a podcast. This is not about diet, but it was on a podcast with Pavel Tsatsouline and Tim Ferriss, and they were talking about how Pavel Tsatsouline, he does kind of like strength training stuff, and he brought kettlebells to Western countries, but he was saying how they don't even really understand how, I mean, they know what activities will lead to muscle mass being built, but they
Mm,
don't, there's still no definitive conclusion on what, what factor induces muscle growth. Like they know,
yeah.
they have a very good idea of if you do this, this will probably happen,
Hmm.
but the actual understanding is not there. So I think with anything in regards to health, we really have still a very bad understanding.
Yeah.
There's
What?
not really any way to know
Yeah. For you
what effect
personally, though,
a
would
diet will
do
have.
you like to take the precautionary method with something like this, where you can see like something that just grows naturally in the wild? I think it's likely to assume that that will be better for us than us creating a chemical that we spray on something. It soaks in. Now, I'm just going to
No,
go with whatever.
I wouldn't. I wouldn't take
Really?
that. What if? Well, because what if somehow that chemical was able to modulate our natural body's clock for lifespan, so it could extend your lifespan?
Oh, I'm not saying that there aren't things that, like, I'm not saying that we have to rely on nature. We could create something that could be better for us. I'm just saying, what is the likelihood that one thing is better or worse than the other? If something is designed to enhance our lifespan, hopefully it'll do what it's designed to do and it'll be good. Um, I'm just talking about like when we're on the fence, it seems to me that it's more obvious which things to be skeptical about. But I could be dead wrong. I just don't think pesticides are necessarily designed to be a benefit for us. The question is, does it harm us much at all?
I don't think there necessarily needs to be a design aspect to that.
Oh no, a fair point. Like it being designed to doesn't matter. The question is, will it benefit
And
us? But what's the likelihood that something's created to be a pesticide to deter pests or to kill pests, and it just so happens that that is something that is a positive to us? It might be a positive.
I
It
think
might be
well,
neutral.
the highest likelihood is that it has a very small health effect that may be positive or negative, but it's not noticeable unless you literally collect samples from the whole population.
Gotcha.
So
Gotcha.
basically, we don't know. But I really don't think like it's even hypothetically possible that if we were to take every permutation of a vegan diet, that 98% of those diets could be slightly worse than 50% or the top 20% of omnivore diets. So if you're only including unprocessed foods, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
it could be worse than those, but there's 2% of the vegan diet that's actually healthier than all omnivore diets. If you're talking only about health,
Mm-hmm.
there's
Yeah,
endless permutations. So
I'm mostly just talking if somebody was going to be eating a whole plant based diet, they just eat fruits, veggies, nuts, seeds, legumes. They're just like making their own food. They're cooking it. Nothing's processed. You make some soups. You eat some fresh veggies or fresh fruits, whatever. I'm just saying that I haven't seen anything to convince me that there's a likelihood that eating non organic can possibly be better or even neutral to eating organic and and yeah, I just yeah, I don't have any strong stance on it. I don't need to. I don't. I just I would want to see the studies coming in saying these pesticides are totally fine. You can even spray these pesticides straight down your throat. Um, and then it just would be what it would be. I have no reason to be against it. I don't need anything to be natural. I'm all about creating things that are not natural. Um, I just yeah, just from what little bit I've looked into, um, I'll send you some things. I'll send you some nutrition facts
okay,
things on organic and
I
non-organic.
actually don't like Michael Greger.
Oh, you
I
do
don't want
not.
to get
Okay,
into it now, but
yeah, that's fine.
um, I do know a lot about his work, and I'm not really a fan.
Gotcha. Interesting. Yeah, then
I don't want to get into that right. That's a whole
we
nother.
can break that down a different time.
But it is if you're talking about the plausibility of more pesticides or synthetic pesticides having a health benefit. There was a book that I read about. Do you know Paul Saladino? Not his book, but
No, I've
he
heard the
he
name.
kind of
I don't know
says,
him too well.
but his whole thing is like plant defense chemicals, and they're all plants are trying to kill you. So if we're talking about, there was another book that I read. I forget the title, but it was about how many of the plant defense chemicals that are go against pathogens in plants also kill human pathogens. So it's possible that the pesticides that kill the synthetic pesticides that kill the plant pathogens could also kill, ingestion of them could kill human pathogens. I think that's an
Hmm.
argument for at least the plausibility of non-organic foods being healthier.
Yeah, no, and that's a good point. And there, once the information's there, once we have an understanding, it's great. It's kind of like the exercise thing. It's like there's a decent chance that exercise is worse for you than no exercise, and there's definitely a chance that many exercises are worse for you than no exercise. But until the right information comes in, it's not just which thing would I enjoy more. I think a lot of these things are kind of like a lot of the cop out anti-vegan examples you put in here. I think it's probably safe to say that humans are designed and better off walking more often than laying down being lazy. Now we could find out that if you eat a healthy diet, laying around being lazy is actually healthier for you than walking. But I have no reason to believe that at this moment. And but anyways, I'm always open to reading anything out there, checking out any studies, looking at any meta-analysis, checking out videos of any kind. So yeah, I'll check them out, and I'll check out the one that everybody's saying to talk about
I
on
just want
the
to
in the
reply to one comment, and then I think we can end this.
yeah.
2/3 cancer occurrence. Um, yeah, but that's, I mean, I do buy that, but that's kind of grouping all pesticides. It could be
Mhm.
that some pesticides increase risk and others don't,
Yeah.
or decrease risk.
That's a perfect example of why I think it's worth being cautious. We could find out, okay, these pesticides are fine and these are not, and we just find out over time. But I just prefer not to be the guinea pig, even if being the guinea pig would make me live longer and happy and healthier. I just wouldn't want to take. I wouldn't want to take that chance, take those odds. I'll just go along with whatever information I am convinced with at each
I
given
don't
time.
really ascribe to that because I think no matter what choice we choose with regards to anything health wise, we're all guinea pigs until there's some
Fair point.
AI that can tell you the exact optimal health, computer modeling of every molecule in your body to test that. I think, yeah, we're all guinea pigs, so take I don't take any dietary choice to be surefire.
Yeah, I mean it's well probably some. There's some that are clear, and then there's in various different directions. I think it's probably safe to say that something like berries are very good for us, and something like meth is very bad for us. Um, and then there's a lot of in between. But yeah, no, I think you're right. I think it's hard to know for sure. Um, but in the same sense that I stay away from meth, I'm just also gonna lump in pesticides there until I hear otherwise. So, but I got you. Um, let's see if I want to say real quick to in the comments. I haven't been following all of it, but Lewis and Travis seem to be having a debate going on about Dr. Avi. And if you guys ever want to come on and do a do a chat where I moderate a debate between you guys, that'd be great. For anybody that's got free time tomorrow, noon PST, I'll be talking with Travis about a few vegan topics he disagrees with me on. And then, yeah, maybe a future time we can get Lewis in there to talk to Travis. Okay, Smexy, it was good talking to you. And whenever you want to talk, let me know. I love talking to you.
Yeah, I'd like to see all the if anyone in the chat has any like scientific papers for the rights violations of organic foods, not the health impacts, but the rights violations. I would like to see that in the
Yeah.
comments of the video.
Have you seen Dr. Avi talk about organic foods?
I have.
Oh, okay. I was going
I
to recommend
wasn't.
that, even though I haven't seen that. That's what everybody is recommending to me. So I
I'd
was
need
going
to
to.
know the exact like what's the increase in profit from the animal agriculture industry and the variation in crop deaths.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, if
And then
anybody has any, yeah. Sorry, what were you saying?
um no, nothing.
Oh, okay. Yeah, if anybody has any links they want to share. Sadly, there's no way to share links on YouTube. Like in the comments, you can't really put links aside from a post and a community post. So if anybody wants to email me some, I can put them in the description here or at least send them over to Smexy. If anybody has any ideas for the best way for people that are part of a YouTube community to share links and ideas with each other, let me know because I like the idea of doing reaction videos to maybe vegan debates and stuff like that. But like, there's no way for anybody in the comments on YouTube to share a link. And so I don't know if I just need to get a Twitter, which I don't have a Twitter, if that's what it's called. I am not on Twitter, and so maybe I need to get on one of those social medias that I'm not on. But yeah, anybody that has a link they want to share with me or with Smexy, just email it to me at reasonablevegan1@gmail.com. And anyways, I'm gonna hop off here, but I'll see you guys in the next one. Bivalve debate of sorts is 6 p.m. PST today, and then tomorrow I'll be talking with Travis at noon PST. All right, take care, everybody.
So just wait, just as
Oh yeah.
a preview, what position are you taking on the bivalve debate?
I have not been convinced to be against eating bivalves. So I do consume some bivalves, and I don't view people as not vegan if they eat them. Um, I don't know how hard I will be debating the position. I'm going to make the conversation be as much as possible about which elements of sentience we value, because the person I'm going to be talking to, I believe, values something being classified as an animal. And so I want him to help break down what he would view as something being worth valuing. And then we can just say, if this bivalve happens to be to contain this thing that's worth value, then it should be acceptable. And then if not, then it's not. Um, so, yeah.
Okay, I think we
Uh,
can sign off now.
yeah. All right. Sounds good. Take care.